The moment my son-in-law pushed my dinner onto the floor, I realized something painful. I had spent years trying to keep peace in my family, but I had forgotten that respect should never have to be begged for. My name is Evelyn Parker, and I am 68 years old. I spent most of my life believing that kindness was the foundation of every relationship. I believed that if you treated people with patience, understanding, and love, they would eventually give you the same in return. For many years, I thought my family understood that. I was wrong. That evening started like any other family dinner at my home in Colorado. I had prepared everything myself. I made the recipe my late husband used to love, the one I had cooked during holidays and special occasions for decades. My daughter, Lauren, and her husband, Daniel, were coming over, and I was excited because I thought it would be a chance for all of us to reconnect. I had spent the afternoon preparing the meal, setting the table, and making sure everything felt warm and welcoming. I still believed that small moments together could bring people closer. When Daniel arrived, I noticed something was different. He seemed impatient. He barely acknowledged the effort I had made. At first, I told myself not to take it personally. Everyone has difficult days. Everyone has moments when they are tired or stressed. That was the excuse I had given myself many times before. But as dinner continued, I started noticing the same pattern I had ignored for years. Small comments, small dismissals, small reminders that he did not see me the way I saw him. To Daniel, I was not the woman who had welcomed him into my family. I was not the person who had supported his marriage and cared for his children. I was simply someone whose kindness had become something he expected. During dinner, a simple disagreement turned into something much bigger. I cannot remember every word that was said, but I remember the feeling in that room. I remember the silence afterward. I remember looking at the meal I had carefully prepared and realizing that the issue was never really about dinner. It was about something much deeper. It was about how easily someone could forget the value of another person's effort. For years, I had stayed quiet because I wanted my daughter to have a happy marriage. I avoided conflict because I did not want to create tension in my family. I told myself that being patient was the same as being strong. But that night, I finally understood something important. Being kind does not mean allowing people to treat you without respect. I looked at Daniel, and instead of reacting the way he expected, I simply stayed calm. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not try to prove my worth. I just sat there and thought about every moment that had brought me to that point. I thought about the years I spent helping my family. I thought about the sacrifices nobody noticed. I thought about how often I had chosen silence to protect everyone else. That was the moment something changed inside me. I realized I did not need to fight for respect. I needed to understand my own value first. Daniel believed the evening would end like every other disagreement before it. He thought I would forgive, forget, and continue being the same person who always put everyone else first. But he did not know that this time was different. He did not know that I had reached a point where I was ready to make a change. I was not looking for revenge. I was not trying to hurt anyone. I simply wanted my family to understand one thing. Love without respect is not enough. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who has the most important lesson to teach. After that evening, I spent a long time thinking about how I had allowed things to reach that point. The truth was, Daniel's actions did not happen overnight. The disrespect had been building slowly, hidden behind small moments that I had chosen to ignore. I told myself that every family had disagreements. I told myself that being patient was part of being a mother. But looking back, I realized there was a difference between understanding someone and allowing them to forget your worth. When my daughter Lauren married Daniel, I welcomed him into my family with an open heart. I wanted him to feel accepted. I wanted him to know that he was not just my daughter's husband, but someone I considered part of the family. I supported them when they were starting their life together. I celebrated their accomplishments. I offered help whenever they needed it. I never kept track of what I gave because that was not how I viewed family. I believed love was something you offered freely. But over time, I noticed that Daniel began seeing my kindness as something automatic. He stopped saying thank you. He stopped asking how I was doing. Conversations became one-sided, and somehow my role changed from a loved family member to someone who was simply expected to provide support. I remember one Thanksgiving when I spent 2 days preparing a meal for everyone. I carefully planned every detail because I wanted the family to enjoy being together. When Daniel arrived, he looked around and immediately pointed out what he thought was missing instead of appreciating what was there. It was a small comment, but it stayed with me because it represented something bigger. It was not about the food. It was about feeling invisible. Still, I stayed quiet. I did not want Lauren caught between her husband and her mother. I did not want my grandchildren to feel tension between the people they loved. So I continued doing what I had always done. I adjusted. I forgave. I gave people the benefit of the doubt. But there comes a moment in life when you have to ask yourself whether keeping peace is worth losing your own dignity. After the dinner incident, I did not make any dramatic announcements. I did not call family members and complain. I did not try to make Daniel look bad. Instead, I went home and sat in my quiet living room, thinking about the woman I had become. For years, I had been proud of being the person everyone could depend on. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that I also deserved care and consideration. The next morning, I made a decision. I would stop chasing approval from people who did not appreciate my efforts. I would still be kind, but I would no longer allow kindness to become an invitation for disrespect. I started with simple changes. I stopped offering help before anyone asked. I stopped rearranging my schedule. Every time someone needed something, I began spending more time with friends, taking walks, and enjoying hobbies I had put aside for years. It was surprising how different life felt when I started making room for myself. Lauren noticed the change before Daniel did. One afternoon, she called and asked if everything was okay. I knew she was worried because she had always known me as the person who tried to make everyone happy. I told her I was fine. I told her I was simply learning to value my own time. She was quiet for a moment, then said something that stayed with me. "Mom, I think you have spent your whole life taking care of everyone else." Hearing my daughter say that made me realize she saw more than I thought. Maybe I had hidden my disappointment too well. Maybe I had spent so much time protecting others that nobody understood I needed protection too. Meanwhile, Daniel continued living as if nothing had changed. He assumed I would return to the same role I had always played. He did not realize that the woman who once stayed silent was beginning to find her voice. I was not changing because I wanted to punish him. I was changing because I finally understood something important. Respect is not something you demand from others. It is something you teach people by the way you choose to treat yourself. For the first time in many years, I started making decisions based on what I wanted instead of what everyone else expected from me. It felt strange at first. I had spent so much of my life being the person who said yes, the person who helped, and the person who made sure everyone around me was comfortable. Changing that habit felt almost unnatural. But slowly, I began to understand that taking care of myself was not selfish. It was necessary. I started filling my days with things I had forgotten I enjoyed. I joined a local gardening group, something I had always wanted to do but never had enough time for. I began taking morning walks through my neighborhood in Colorado, appreciating the quiet moments I used to overlook. I reconnected with old friends who reminded me that I was more than just a mother, a grandmother, or someone's source of support. I was Evelyn, a woman with her own dreams and interests. The biggest change was not something other people could see. It happened inside me. I stopped measuring my value by how much I could do for others. For years, I believed that being needed was the same as being loved. I finally learned that true relationships are built on appreciation, not obligation. A few months after the dinner incident, Daniel noticed that things were different. He called one afternoon asking if I could help with a family matter. In the past, I would have immediately changed my plans and rushed to help. This time, I politely told him that I was not available. There was a pause on the other end of the phone. I could almost hear his surprise. "You are busy?" he asked. It was a simple question, but it revealed something important. He was not used to hearing me say no. "Yes," I answered calmly. "I have plans." I did not explain myself. I did not apologize. I simply stated the truth. That moment may seem small, but for me, it represented a major change. I was no longer waiting for permission to value my own time. Later that week, Lauren called me again. She sounded concerned. "Mom, Daniel thinks you are upset with him," she said. I took a deep breath before answering. "I am not trying to punish him, Lauren. I am just choosing to have boundaries." She was quiet for a moment. "I think maybe he needs to understand that you have feelings too." Hearing that from my daughter meant a lot. I never wanted Lauren to feel forced to choose between her husband and me. That was never my goal. I wanted her to understand that love does not mean accepting everything from someone. A healthy family is not built on one person constantly giving while everyone else takes. It requires balance. It requires respect from everyone. Around that time, I also began organizing my personal affairs more carefully. After my husband passed away, I had spent years making sure my family was comfortable. I helped when I could because I wanted to create security for the people I loved. But I realized I needed to think about my own future too. I started reviewing my finances, my plans, and the things that mattered most to me. It was not about keeping anything from my family. It was about making sure my choices reflected my own needs and values. Daniel did not know about these changes. He still saw me as the same woman who would always be there no matter how she was treated. He did not understand that my silence had never meant weakness. It had meant patience. But patience has limits. One evening, I received an unexpected message from him. It was short, but it was the first time in a long while that his words sounded different. He asked if we could talk. I looked at the message for several minutes before responding. Part of me remembered the pain of that dinner. Another part of me remembered that family relationships are complicated. People can make mistakes. People can grow. But growth only begins when someone is willing to recognize what needs to change. I agreed to meet with him. Not because I had forgotten what happened. Not because I wanted to pretend everything was fine. I agreed because I wanted to see whether Daniel was ready to understand the lesson I had already learned. Respect is not about winning an argument. It is about recognizing the value of another person before it is too late. When I agreed to meet Daniel, I did not know what to expect. For years, our conversations had been polite but distant. I had accepted that some people only understand your value after they realize you are no longer willing to be taken for granted. Still, a part of me hoped that this conversation would be different. Not because I wanted an apology, but because I wanted to know if Daniel had finally started seeing me as a person instead of someone who was always available to help. We met at a quiet cafe near my home. I arrived a few minutes early and sat by the window, watching people walk by. I thought about the woman I had been before that dinner. She was someone who believed that keeping everyone happy was the same as keeping a family together. She was someone who avoided difficult conversations because she was afraid they might create distance. But the woman sitting there that afternoon had learned something important. Peace without respect is not real peace. When Daniel arrived, he looked different. Not physically, but in the way he carried himself. He seemed less confident than usual, almost as if he was carefully choosing his words. He sat down across from me and took a moment before speaking. "Evelyn, I owe you an apology," he said. I listened quietly. I have been thinking about what happened that night, and I realize I was wrong. Those words were simple, but they were something I never expected to hear. For a long time, I had wondered if Daniel even understood why his actions hurt me. "I want to explain something," he continued. "I was frustrated that day, but that does not excuse how I treated you." I appreciated that he did not try to blame the situation or make excuses. Taking responsibility is not easy, especially when someone has spent a long time believing they were justified. "Do you understand what hurt me the most?" I asked. Daniel looked at me and shook his head. "It was not the argument," I said. "It was feeling like everything I had done for this family meant nothing." He looked down for a moment. I could tell he was thinking about all the moments he had overlooked. The holidays I prepared. The times I offered support. The years I tried to make him feel welcomed. "I did take those things for granted," he admitted. "I thought you would always be there no matter what." That sentence was exactly what I had needed him to understand. Love should never become an excuse to stop showing appreciation. Family should not be a place where people assume one person will always sacrifice. I told Daniel that I was not interested in making him feel guilty forever. Holding on to anger would only hurt me. But forgiveness did not mean returning to the way things were. "I can forgive you," I said. "But forgiveness does not mean I forget my own worth." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." Our conversation continued for almost 2 hours. We talked about things we had avoided for years. He shared some of the stress he had been carrying, and I listened. But this time, listening did not mean accepting disrespect. It meant understanding another person while still honoring myself. Before we left, Daniel said something that surprised me. "I think I saw you as my mother-in-law, but I forgot you were also a woman with your own feelings, dreams, and life." That sentence stayed with me, because that was the truth many people forget about older family members. They see the roles we play, but they forget the person underneath. A mother, a grandmother, a friend, a woman who has her own hopes and needs. As I drove home that evening, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not victory, not satisfaction, peace. The lesson I wanted Daniel to learn was never about making him feel small. It was about helping him understand something I had finally learned myself. Respect begins when we recognize that every person, regardless of age or position in a family, deserves to be treated with dignity. But I also knew that this conversation was only the beginning. Words were meaningful, but real change would always be shown through actions. After my conversation with Daniel, I thought things would slowly return to normal, but I quickly realized that normal was no longer what I wanted. For years, I had accepted the same patterns because I believed that was what family required. I thought being a good mother meant always being available. I thought being a good mother-in-law meant avoiding conflict at all costs. But I finally understood that a healthy family relationship cannot be built on one person constantly giving while everyone else simply accepts. Real change is not created by one conversation. It is created by the choices people make afterward. Over the next few weeks, I watched Daniel carefully. I was not looking for perfection. I was not expecting him to suddenly become a completely different person. I simply wanted to see whether his apology was supported by his actions. Slowly, I noticed small differences. He started asking about my day instead of only talking about his own problems. He thanked me when I offered help instead of assuming it was something I should do. He began treating my opinions with more consideration. These changes may sound simple, but after years of feeling overlooked, they meant something. Respect is often built through small moments repeated over time. One evening, Lauren invited me over for dinner. In the past, I would have arrived early, helped prepare everything, and spent the entire evening making sure everyone else was comfortable. This time, I simply came as a guest. I brought a dessert, sat at the table, and enjoyed the conversation. It felt strange at first. I had spent so many years being the person who made everything happen that allowing others to take responsibility felt unfamiliar. But I realized something important. When you always do everything for people, sometimes you prevent them from understanding what you actually contribute. During dinner, Daniel asked me about my gardening group. He remembered something I had mentioned weeks earlier. It was a small detail, but it showed me that he was finally paying attention. Before, I often felt like my words disappeared after I said them. That evening, I felt heard. After dinner, Daniel and I had a quiet conversation while Lauren was preparing coffee. He told me something that surprised me. "I think I treated you differently because I forgot how much you had done for us," he said. "I saw the things you provided, but I did not see the effort behind them." I appreciated his honesty. Many people are willing to apologize for a specific moment, but fewer people are willing to examine the attitude that caused that moment. "Daniel," I told him, "I do not need you to feel bad forever. I need you to understand that family members are not resources. They are people." He nodded. "I understand that now." I believed him because his behavior was beginning to match his words. That was the difference. An apology can open a door, but actions are what prove someone has walked through it. Around that time, I also started spending more time with my grandchildren. I noticed they were learning from the adults around them. Children watch how people treat each other. They learn from kindness, patience, and respect. I wanted them to grow up understanding that every person deserves to be valued, regardless of age. I did not want them to think older family members existed only to help others. I wanted them to see that grandparents, parents, and every person in a family have their own dreams and feelings. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part of my journey was not teaching Daniel a lesson. The hardest part was teaching myself that my value was never determined by how much I could sacrifice. For years, I measured love by what I could give. Now, I measured love by how people treated me in return. Daniel had started changing, but so had I. I was no longer the woman who stayed silent because she was afraid of losing her place in the family. I was a woman who understood that respect and love should exist together. And as our relationship slowly improved, I knew there was still more to learn. Because forgiveness can repair the past, but trust is built one day at a time. As the months passed, I began to notice that the relationship between Daniel and me was changing in ways I never expected. But the biggest change was not in him. It was in me. For years, I had believed that my role in the family was to be the person who gave, supported, and stayed quiet when things became difficult. I thought love meant making sacrifices without asking for anything in return. But I finally understood that real love is not built on one person constantly giving while everyone else forgets to appreciate them. A family should be a place where people feel valued, not a place where someone feels invisible. One Saturday morning, Lauren invited me to spend the day with her and the grandchildren. While we were sitting in the backyard, watching them play, she looked at me and smiled. Mom, I have noticed something different about you lately. I laughed softly and asked what she meant. You seem happier, she said. Not because you are doing more for everyone. Actually, you are doing less. But you seem more like yourself. Her words stayed with me because they were true. For years, I had measured my importance by how useful I was. If someone needed help, I was there. If someone had a problem, I tried to solve it. If there was tension in the family, I tried to fix it. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that my own happiness mattered too. I told Lauren that I was finally learning something I should have understood years earlier. Being needed is not the same as being loved, I said. She nodded and held my hand. I think Daniel needed to learn that too. Around that time, Daniel began making more of an effort to include me in family decisions. Before, he would often make plans and assume I would simply adjust. Now, he started asking for my thoughts. He started treating me like a person whose opinion mattered. One evening, he asked me to help him choose a gift for Lauren's birthday. It was a small thing, but I noticed the difference. Years earlier, he would have expected me to handle everything. Now, he was involving me because he valued my perspective. While we were shopping, Daniel said something that surprised me. I have been thinking about the way I acted before, he said. I think I confused your kindness with weakness. I looked at him carefully. That was an important realization. Many people mistake patience for weakness because they do not understand the strength it takes to remain kind. Kindness is not weakness, I told him. But kindness also needs boundaries. He nodded. I understand that now. That conversation meant more to me than any apology. Because true change is not about saying the perfect words. It is about understanding the impact of your actions and choosing to do better. I also noticed a change in Lauren. She became more comfortable speaking openly about difficult topics. For years, she had avoided conflict because she wanted everyone to get along. But she started realizing that avoiding problems does not always create peace. Sometimes honest conversations are what protect relationships. One afternoon, she told me something that touched my heart. Mom, I wish I had noticed sooner how much you were carrying. I smiled and told her not to blame herself. Families are complicated. People often do not recognize what someone is giving until that person stops giving everything away. Looking back, I realized the dinner incident was not the moment my family broke apart. It was actually the moment we had a chance to rebuild something healthier. Daniel learned that respect should never be assumed. Lauren learned that protecting family does not mean ignoring problems. And I learned that my worth was never measured by how much I could do for others. The woman who sat quietly at that dinner table months earlier was not gone. She had simply discovered her voice. I was still the same person who loved my family deeply. The difference was that I finally included myself in that love. And as our family continued moving forward, I knew the most important lesson was one that would last far beyond that one difficult evening. Respect is not something that appears automatically because people are related. It is something we build through every word, every action, and every choice we make toward each other. The greatest changes in a family are not always the ones people notice immediately. Sometimes they happen quietly, through small choices made every day. That was what happened with Daniel and me. There was no single moment when everything suddenly became perfect. There was no dramatic conversation where every problem disappeared. Instead, there were small signs that showed something important was changing. We were learning how to treat each other differently. One afternoon, Daniel invited me over to his house because he wanted to show me a project he had been working on. In the past, I would have assumed he needed my help with something. I would have arrived prepared to solve problems and make things easier for him. But this time felt different. He wanted to share something with me, not simply ask something from me. That difference mattered. While we were sitting together, Daniel opened up about something I did not expect. He told me that he had spent a lot of time thinking about the way he treated people when he was younger. I thought being successful meant being in control, he said. I thought I had to have all the answers. I listened carefully because I understood something about that feeling. We all have moments when pride prevents us from seeing clearly. The hardest part, Daniel continued, is realizing that I hurt someone who was always trying to help me. I appreciated his honesty, but I also wanted him to understand that change was not about carrying guilt forever. It was about becoming a better person moving forward. Daniel, I said, the most important thing is not that you made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is what you do after you realize it. He nodded. That conversation reminded me that forgiveness is not about pretending the past did not happen. It is about allowing people the opportunity to become better while still remembering the lessons those experiences taught us. Around that time, our family started spending more time together. Holidays felt different. Conversations felt more balanced. I noticed that Daniel made an effort to include everyone, especially me. He would ask for my opinion during family discussions. He would thank me for things he once overlooked. These moments were not huge, but they showed respect in a way that words alone could not. One evening during a family dinner, my granddaughter asked me why I seemed happier lately. I smiled and told her that sometimes people spend years taking care of everyone else and forget to take care of themselves. She looked at me with curiosity and asked if I had learned something new. I told her that I learned something very important. Being kind is wonderful, I said. But you should also remember that you deserve kindness too. Later that night, Lauren told me she was proud of the changes I had made. She said she had always seen me as strong, but she never realized how much strength it took to set boundaries. That meant a lot to me because for many years, I thought strength meant silently accepting difficult situations. Now I knew strength could also mean speaking honestly and respecting yourself. Daniel continued to show improvement, but the most meaningful thing was that he no longer acted differently only because he wanted forgiveness. He acted differently because he understood the importance of respect. That was the difference between temporary regret and real growth. Looking back at the evening when everything changed, I no longer saw it only as a painful memory. I saw it as a turning point. It forced me to examine my own choices and recognize that I had allowed some people to forget my value because I had forgotten to show them my boundaries. I still loved my family. I still wanted to support them, but I no longer believed love meant giving away pieces of yourself. Until there was nothing left. The lesson I learned was simple but powerful. A family becomes stronger when every person feels respected. Not because they are perfect, not because they never make mistakes, but because they are willing to listen, learn, and grow. And after everything we had experienced, I finally felt that my family understood something I had known all along. Respect is not a reward someone earns after being useful. Respect is something every person deserves from the beginning. As I look back on the journey my family and I have taken, I realize that the most meaningful changes did not come from one dramatic moment. They came from the small decisions we made every day. They came from choosing patience instead of anger, understanding instead of judgment, and respect instead of pride. For a long time, I believed the hardest part of my experience was what happened during that dinner. But now I understand that the real challenge was learning how to see my own worth after years of putting everyone else first. I had spent so much time being the person who supported others that I forgot I also deserved support. That was the lesson I carried with me as my relationship with Daniel continued to improve. One weekend, our family gathered at my home for a simple afternoon together. There was nothing special planned. No holiday. No celebration. Just family spending time together. As I watched everyone talking and laughing, I noticed something that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Daniel was helping prepare the meal. He asked if he could assist instead of assuming I would handle everything. It was a small gesture, but I knew it represented something much bigger. He was no longer seeing my efforts as something automatic. He was finally understanding the value behind them. While we were in the kitchen, Daniel looked at me and said, "I know things are different now, but I want you to know I appreciate everything you have done for our family." I smiled and thanked him, but I also told him something important. Daniel, appreciation is not just about remembering what someone has done in the past. It is about how you treat them today. He nodded because he understood. Respect is not something you show only after making a mistake. It is something you practice every day. Later that afternoon, Lauren and I sat together outside while everyone else was spending time inside. She told me how grateful she was that our family had found a healthier way to communicate. "I used to think avoiding problems was the best way to keep everyone together," she said. "But I realize now that honest conversations are what make families stronger." I agreed with her. Silence may prevent an argument for a short time, but it does not solve the feelings underneath. Sometimes the conversations we avoid are the ones that can create the most healing. I thought about the woman I was before everything changed. She was loving. She was generous. She cared deeply about her family. But she also believed that her needs should always come last. She believed that if she kept giving, people would automatically understand her value. The truth was different. People often learn how to treat us based on what we allow and what we communicate. Setting boundaries did not make me less loving. It made my relationships more honest. Daniel was not the only person who changed. I changed too. I learned that being a strong person does not mean carrying every burden alone. It means knowing when to help and knowing when to step back. It means understanding that your kindness has value, but so does your peace. As the months passed, our family continued to grow closer. There were still disagreements, because every family has them. But the difference was that we handled them differently. We listened more. We respected each other's feelings. We stopped assuming and started asking. Looking back, I never wanted Daniel to feel embarrassed or defeated. I never wanted him to suffer. The only lesson I wanted him to understand was that every person deserves dignity, regardless of their age or position in a family. That lesson was not just for him. It was for all of us. Because sometimes we become so familiar with the people who love us that we forget to show them the same care we would show a stranger. My experience taught me that respect is the foundation of every strong relationship. Love may bring people together, but respect is what allows them to stay connected. And after everything we went through, I was grateful that my family had finally learned that lesson together. Years later, when I think about that difficult season of my life, I no longer see it as the moment my family was divided. I see it as the moment we were given a chance to become better. Sometimes the most painful experiences reveal the lessons we need the most. They show us where we have been silent for too long, where we have forgotten our own value, and where we need to make changes not only in others, but also within ourselves. I am Evelyn Parker, and at 68 years old, I learned one of the most important lessons of my life. Respect is not about demanding that people treat you better. It begins with understanding that you deserve to be treated with dignity. Looking back, I do not believe Daniel was a terrible person. I believe he was someone who had forgotten an important truth. Family members are not there only to provide comfort, assistance, or support whenever needed. They are people with their own feelings, dreams, and boundaries. Sometimes people become so comfortable with the love they receive that they stop noticing the effort behind it. Daniel had to learn that lesson, but so did I. I had to learn that constantly giving does not guarantee that people will appreciate you. Sometimes you have to show others that your time, your kindness, and your presence have value. The biggest change in my life was not that Daniel started treating me differently. The biggest change was that I started treating myself differently. I stopped seeing myself only through the roles I played for others. I was not just a mother. I was not just a grandmother. I was not just someone who prepared meals, offered advice, or helped solve problems. I was Evelyn. I was a woman with experiences, memories, hopes, and dreams that mattered. My relationship with Daniel became stronger because we both learned something important. He learned that respect should never be assumed. I learned that setting boundaries does not mean you love people less. In fact, healthy boundaries often allow relationships to become stronger because they create honesty and understanding. Today, our family gatherings feel different. There is more appreciation around the table. There is more willingness to listen. There is more awareness that every person deserves to feel valued. Daniel still makes mistakes sometimes. I still make mistakes too. We are all human. But now we have a better way of handling those moments. We talk. We listen. We try to understand instead of immediately judging. That is what makes a family stronger. Not perfection. Not pretending problems do not exist. But the willingness to grow together. I often think about that younger version of myself who believed that keeping everyone happy was the only way to keep a family together. I wish I could tell her that her kindness was beautiful, but she did not need to disappear behind it. She deserved the same patience and compassion she gave to everyone else. I hope my story reminds others that age does not make someone less important. The wisdom that comes from years of experience should be respected, not ignored. Older family members are not simply people who provide help. They are people who have stories, lessons, and love to share. The evening that changed everything started with a painful moment, but it ended with something much more meaningful. It created an opportunity for understanding. It reminded us that love without respect cannot truly grow. And it showed me that sometimes the quietest person in the room can have the strongest message. I never wanted to teach Daniel a lesson through anger. I wanted him to understand the value of respect. In the end, that lesson was not only for him. It was for our entire family. Because every relationship becomes stronger when people remember one simple truth. Every person, no matter their age or position, deserves to be seen, heard, and respected.